I told you stop following me, son of a bitch! Tell this mother... Back up!
Bro, what the fuck you got going on, bro? Bro, you good?
Get that mother...
Bro, calm down!
Get that...
Bro, you good?
Back up!
Bro, come on!
Get on me back!
Oh, shit, bro,
Get off my board! Get off my board!
Bro, you see a spider or something, bro? Bro, the fuck you
back up!
Bro, chill! Bro.
I just rang your doorbell because I have a couple questions for you. What? Are you sure?
Friends. How many of us have them? Friends. Ones we can depend on. Friends. How many of us have them? Friends. Before we go any further, let's be friends.
When I was a kid, I used to play for hours with someone I thought was an imaginary friend, only I could see. One day, my mom asked who I was talking to, and I told her my brother. She got really scared and turned white and left the room. When I said the same thing to my dad, he got really mad and sternly told me never to do that again. And I never saw my brother again after that. My parents told me I never played with anybody, that I just made it up. Well, fast forward 10 years later, when I was snooping through the family Bible, I found a picture and a note from my mom, showing that I did indeed have a brother. He died a year before I was born. But in the note, my mom wrote that they buried him in the woods in the backyard, so no one would ever find out what happened.
I got another ghost story to tell you about that was actually kind of creepy. There was a girl, right, in the early 2000s, and she always used to tell her parents, like, yeah, I have an imaginary friend. She lives in the basement. And her parents always used to say, like, they didn't like going to the basement because it was so dark and, like, a little mysterious looking, but they didn't really think of it because she was, like, 6, whatever. She used to tell a story, like, yeah, I used to go into the basement, talk to my imaginary friend, and tell her, like, why don't you come to school with me? And their friend always used to say, I can't leave the basement. So now she grows up, she moves out of the house, and somebody moves in. The girl gets a phone call. It's the new family that moved into the crib. They're like, oh, did you guys ever notice there was a hidden door in the basement? We're doing renovations in the basement, and we found like a hidden like hallway with a door behind it. She said they found 2 dead bodies. They found a body of a man and a body of a little girl wearing a white dress. Maybe that was her imaginary friend that she's seen all her life.
She was talking to a dead body?
She was talking to a dead body.
God, yeah.
But like, she was a kid though. Ghosts probably just pertain to little kids. And their brains are not developed yet. They're not going to be scared. Like, if we see something, we're going to be scared as hell.
Let's not peak ghost intelligence here. Like, I'm going to aim for the kids and dogs.
I don't know, man.
It's just like, we have so much proof of literally everything that exists on this planet. Why is that like one of the only things we've never had any proof of?
Tonight's true scary story is pretty remarkable. This person got like solid proof that there was a ghost attached to them. Also, I just got a spray tan, so we're gonna have to ignore my face, okay? Okay, thank you. Also, before I get started, I just want to remind you to subscribe to my... The link is in my link tree in my bio, where I tell scarier stories and longer versions of stories. And tonight, there will be a story on there that you have not heard yet. Also, if you want to send me your true scary story, my email is in my bio. Okay, let's get started. Tonight's submitter did not say if I could say their name or not, so we're just going to call them Callie. One summer, when Callie was in preschool, her and her family took a trip to Mexico's beautiful Penasco. I'm butchering that. I'm so sorry. Don't come for me. On their way back from their trip, they got stuck in the middle of nowhere in traffic, and it was because of a multi-rollover car accident. It was so bad that it caused police to block off the road. Now, her mother, she said, was kind of nosy, and she got out of the car and she asked the police officers if everyone was okay. They then unfortunately told her that a young mother and her 5-year-old daughter had passed away due to flying out of the car in the accident. On the way back, when the road was cleared, they continued to drive back to the States, but her parents started noticing that Callie was talking to somebody in the backseat of the car while she was coloring in her notebook. Side note, she was the only child at the time, and she was the only person in the back seat. And her mom asked her, "Who are you speaking to, Callie?" And she said, "Mia. She's my new friend and she likes coloring too." Her mom brushed this off as her just having like a creative mind and maybe having like a new imaginary friend. Fast forward a couple weeks later and she would not do anything without Mia. Her and Mia were inseparable. She was constantly asking her mother if Mia could come with her wherever she went. One day her mom has a bad day at the office and she comes home from work and Callie asks her, "Mommy, why did you cry at work?" And her mom is like, "What? How did you know that?" And she said, "Mia told me." Now this really creeped her mom out, but what creeped her out even more was the fact that Callie started sharing family things with her that she couldn't have possibly known. And her mom was like, "How the hell are you finding these things out? You're a child." Finally, at a family cookout, her uncle comes up to her and asks her to draw a picture of Mia. So she draws a picture of Mia and she draws her with big brown eyes and long curly locks. Her uncle then tries to convince her mother to talk to a priest, and she ignores this comment until one day she is giving Callie a bath and she leaves for a second to go finish the dishes, and she hears Callie singing, but she also hears another little girl's voice singing. As soon as her mother heard this, her blood went cold and her heart dropped to her stomach because she knew that they were the only two people in that house. Her mother then runs over to the bathroom to get her out of the bathtub, and she goes to the bathroom and she sees another girl in the bathtub with long curly brown hair and brown eyes. She ran to get Callie out of the tub, and then she called a priest, and a priest came to the home to bless the home and to bless Callie. Later that night, Callie comes up to her mother and she begs her mother to let Mia and her mother come home with them because they are from Mexico and they have nowhere to stay. That's what she tells her mother. Her mother then yelled at her out of fear and was like, "Tell Mia that her and her mother are not welcome in our home." Mia got really upset, she listened, and she walked away. Her mom then decides to do some research on that mother and daughter that were unalived in that car accident from Mexico. Lo and behold, she finds out that Carolina and Mia Santiago were unalived in that car accident in a news article. In the news article, there's a picture of both the mom and the daughter, and the little girl was the same little girl who she had seen in the bathtub with curly long brown hair and brown eyes. She had befriended her while they were stuck in traffic, and she followed her home with her mother. Later on, Callie's mother would ask her, "How are Mia and her mother doing?" And Callie would respond confused, saying, "What are you talking about?" It was like after she had gotten that blessing from that priest, her memory was completely wiped of both of them. Callie still has no recollection of Mia, but her family still brings it up whenever they talk about ghost stories. Callie also told me that she is a news reporter at a local station in El Paso, Texas, home of the Walmart massacre that claimed the lives of 23 people, unfortunately. She says that she has tons of crime and ghost stories that she can send in if we like. Tell me guys, do you want to hear her stories? If you do, drop it in the comments and I will email her back asking her to send more stories. I think that was a pretty good one, you guys. What do you think? I think it's very interesting that there is an attachment right away, like immediately. They found the family, they saw that the mother had gotten out of the car and asked how they were doing, and it's almost like they were like, okay, this person may be nice, we're gonna jump in their car. That's what I'm thinking. What are you guys thinking? Because I don't know why they would attach themselves specifically to that family. That is definitely my biggest question of why they would attach themselves to that family, and I do think it has something to do with her mother getting out of the car. Drop in the comments what you guys think. Other than that, my name is Kaisa and I tell true scary stories that you guys submit to me on here every single night, and I'm about to do my shout outs. My first shout out is going to Kimmers. Kimmers, you are such a sweetheart. We have gone back and forth commenting and you are just a light in my comments. I really do appreciate you and I love you for being so supportive. Thank you. And my second shout out is going to Brittany Jade. Brittany, thank you so much for being a hardcore follower. I love that you said that. That was so sweet. And I appreciate you watching my videos and supporting my channel. It truly means so much to me. I love you for that. Guys, there are so many of you that I want to shout out. So know that I will get to you. I notice every single one of your comments, and all of you that are asking me for the shout outs, I promise I will also get to you too. I love you guys all so much. Guys, keep sending me your spooky stories, okay? And I need you to do two things for me. And what are those? Have a safe night and what? Have a spooky night. Love you guys. See you in the next one.
This is a true story and the only paranormal experience I've ever had. I always thought I was a skeptic when it came to the paranormal, but this has swayed my opinion. My son and I lived in a lovely 2-bedroom ground floor flat in Upton in Dorset. We moved into the flat in September 2019. My son was just under 3 at the time. The first couple of months in the flat were great, nothing to report. That December was my son's 3rd birthday. He got a pop-up circus tent as a present from his dad.
You're already going to get home.
Yeah.
That is the next.
Grim. Absolutely vile.
It came with clowns.
Sabrina, this is completely your fault.
He loved it, and as soon as he had opened it up, he wanted me to put it up in his room. He would play in it all the time with his teddies and blankets, having a blast. A few days after his birthday, I noticed he would talk in his tent. Assuming he was chatting to his teddies, I didn't think much of it. Except whenever I'd walk down the hallway to his bedroom, he would stop. He can't see me in the hallway from his room, and the floor under the carpet was concrete. Walking in the flat was pretty much silent, and I could never hear what was being said. As I would get to this door and look around, he would be looking out of his tent with an adorable smile. Everything seemed fine. He would spend all his time in the tent, which, thinking back on it, gives me the creeps. I asked him about why he likes to spend time in the tent so much and if I could come in and play with him and his teddies. He looked at me sternly and said, "No, Mummy, you can't." I asked why. My son said, "Stephen said no."
Oh, no.
Not gonna lie, I shit myself.
Yeah.
Love it.
You would, wouldn't you? No.
I left it at that for a few days, asking my mum for advice. She isn't into the ghost scene, but is a lot more spiritual than I am. She had told me to ask some more questions to see if this was just your standard imaginary friend or something more sinister. The next day, I asked my son, "What do you and Stephen talk about?" My son was eating his dinner and replied, "We talk about what I do at Shelley's," his childminder, "and we play games, and we talk about you, Mummy." I was freaked out at the end part. What about me? I asked my son what Stephen looked like. "He has a stripy suit and a funny hat." "Was he little like you or big like Mummy?" I said. "Old like Gruffy," his granddad. "And he blows smoke like a dragon," he smiled. "Oh, that's nice." My palms are sweating. "Is he nice?" "Sometimes." He shrugged his shoulders and asked if he could go and play. I said sure. He was probably tired from the day, as was I, and I didn't want to talk anymore. He was playing in his tent as usual. I made a start on washing up from dinner. Our kitchen sink faces the window out into the communal garden, though no one ever uses it. As I was drying up, I stared through the window in an exhausted gaze when I saw in the reflection a figure. It walks behind me through the hallway into the lounge. I jumped and spun around, assuming it was my son coming to look for me, even though the figure was much larger than my 3-year-old. I put my head into the lounge. Empty. I walked towards my son's room and stood in the doorway. There he was, playing in his tent, like he always did. Before I had time to think about what had happened, a strong stench of stale smoke wafted into my face. Then, quick as it came, it was gone. I thought maybe someone was in the garden smoking outside the window, so I shut the small window that was slightly open and went back to the kitchen. After the bedtime routine, I kissed my son and put him to bed. As I kissed him goodnight, he said, "Say goodnight to Stephen, Mummy." My eyes wide as I followed my son's gaze towards the tent. "Good night, Stephen," I said. I looked back at my son. He smiled and blew me a kiss. I just sat down for the evening, book in hand, hot cuppa on the coffee table, blanket over my legs, when the lounge had suddenly become freezing. I don't mean your typical January winter evening cold. I mean inside of an industrial meat freezer cold. I could see my breath. I jumped up, checking the windows. They were all closed. I went into the hallway. The thermometer was set to its normal temperature and the radiators were warm. I walked back into the lounge. The warmth of the radiators hit me. That's odd, I thought. I was about to sit down. I thought I could hear coughing coming from my son's room. I got up to check on him. As I walked through and checked on my son, soundly sleeping, I almost didn't notice the shadow inside the tent. If it wasn't for the glow of the moon through the window, it almost consumed the whole tent. My body tensed, tears welling up in my eyes as I stepped forward, quickly pulling the curtain of the tent to the side. Nothing, just some teddies, a pad and some pencils. I sighed. I must be more tired than I thought. Then the stale smoke hit me again. This time it seemed to come straight at me from inside the tent. I stand up and gently pick up my son, sound asleep in my arms. I put him into my bed and I climb in beside him. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. I couldn't stop seeing the shadow in the tent, the memory flashing through my head. I kept thinking about all the weird happenings in the house and how there must be an explanation for all of it. When I hear my phone buzz, it's my childminder. "Hello," I say. "Oh, hiya, nothing to worry about. I just wanted to call and speak about some things your son has said to me today," she said, worried. I had a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. "Okay," I said hesitantly. "Has your son ever mentioned Stephen?" My childminder said. "Oh yeah, he's been speaking about him lately. It's just his imaginary friend," I say. Who was I trying to convince, her or myself? "Well, he's been saying that Stephen doesn't like you," she said, stammering as she spoke. What the fuck? I was shocked and a little disgusted. "He told me today that Stephen didn't like you moving your son in the night. He said he had to sit on the end of the bed and that he was angry with you." "Oh my God," I said, sitting at my desk at work trying to hold back tears. I spent my lunch Googling how to get rid of a ghost. I felt stupid, but at the time I was so scared to go home with my son. I phoned my mum and we went over to hers for dinner that night. I'd bought some sage from a little shop in town on my way. Good idea.
Very good,
Get the fucking
and
sage.
some Himalayan rock salt.
Yeah,
as well.
get the salt, spray it everywhere. You can't spray salt, but if you could. I bought some sage from a little shop in town on my way, and I planned on burning it when I got home. I mean, that's what the internet had told me to do. The article I read told me to speak to the ghost and tell them that they are not welcome and they need to leave bluntly and strongly. It said to do it where there is most activity in the home. Oh God, that fucking tent, I thought. Fucking circus tent. I should never have got it.
Burn the goddamn tent to the ground.
This is literally intense.
No, it is. I know.
He's a comedian.
Oh my God. Ross Noble, step aside. I get home, put my son to sleep in my bed for the night. I light the sage and walk through the entire house, wafting the sage in all corners of our home. I then come to the doorway into my son's bedroom, taking a deep breath and telling myself, stop being a pussy. I walk in, sage in hand. I crouch down and climb inside the tent, leaving the tent curtains open so as not to smoke myself out with the sage. You are not welcome in our home. You need to leave, I said sternly and with conviction. I said it a couple of times, then I smelt it again. Stale smoke in the fucking tent. I bolted out so quickly I picked up the tent, dismantled it and threw it into the large communal bins. I did not want that in my house anymore. I had to explain to my son that the tent broke. He was obviously really upset. To cheer him up, I told him we were going to take a trip to Monkey World. He's 3. He forgot he even had a tent after that news. I was getting ready in my bedroom for our exciting trip, my son playing in his room. When suddenly I heard a blood-curdling scream come from my son. I dropped what I was doing and ran in. He was standing in the room, white as a sheet, visibly shaking. I rushed over, checking his body, thinking he fell off his bed or something. I hugged him and told him it would be okay and that Mummy's here. As his head was resting on my shoulder, he whispered in my ear, I don't like Stephen anymore.
Oh, God.
After that, I terminated my tenancy and we stayed with my parents until we could find somewhere else. My son has never spoken about what happened in that room. And since we've left, he's never seen or spoken about Stephen again. Thank you. Love your podcast and I hope you enjoy my story. It still chills me to this day.
Oh my
God.
God.
Blimey. Bloody hell.
So, bloody hell, Sabrina.
So, when I was younger, I'm pretty sure I was being haunted by my imaginary friend who also lived inside a doll. I know how crazy that sounds, but hear me out. I am from the South, specifically Louisiana. We are very spiritual people where we come from, and because of that, I feel like we kind of invite the spirits in. It is not something that I would have believed for like 15 years. So I'm about 4 years old at the time, and as a gift, one of my grandparents got me a doll for my birthday. They were very into like collecting antiques. Well, because these were collector items, I was not allowed to play with them. Which is fine, you know, I understand that. Anyway, so around 3, 4, 5, however old I was, I go up to my parents and I say, hey, I have a imaginary friend. Her name is Gloria, and she lives in the mirror. She looks like me, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes. I was more blonde back then. And we're best friends. Parents thought it was kind of weird because I did not know anyone named Gloria, nor have I met anyone named Gloria, but they kind of just went along with it. So me and Gloria were best friends. I remember her vividly as a child. I would always talk to her when she was in the mirror, but then we'd go outside to play. She was always one for like mischief, and I feel like a lot of kids will blame their imaginary friend for getting them in trouble, but I don't know. So one day Gloria comes up to me and is like, hey, those dolls up there, let's play with that one. And I remember this conversation like so clearly. I remember talking to her. It's a very weird memory. I remember going, no, we're not allowed to. We can't do that. Da, 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 da. And I remember her being so insistent, like, no, get it. And it was up on like a very high shelf. I had to climb on top of the cabinet that we had the TV on, and then I had to like pull on the shelves and climb up those. It was super tall. Finally, it wears me down, and I go, okay. So me being a small child, I have to like pull something over to where the TV was on, stand on top of it, kind of like maneuver myself around that. And then the second I get to this doll. I reach and I grab the shelf so I can grab it with my other hand. Whole thing comes down, crashing on top of me. Everything that was on the shelf, everything, it just pulled off the wall onto me. It makes a huge sound and Gloria is gone. And I am like, I'm so embarrassed. As a child, I was just embarrassed. Like, why did I do that? Of course, my mom comes in the room screaming and she sees me clutching the doll that I was trying to get to. And I do think that this is like one of my earliest childhood memories. So of course my mom is upset, I get punished. She takes the doll away from me because clearly it can't be in this room anymore because it's a hazard to my life. And then a week later, I go up to my parents and I say, Gloria moved away. She went away. She's gone. I started being a little bit sad about this as a kid, but I was also kind of like, I just got in a lot of trouble. And then I thought that was the end of it. Come to find out, 15 years later, my mom and I are talking about it, and she told me she opened up that doll that I was obsessed with. She opened it up, pulled out the paper of authenticity or certificate of authenticity, and the doll's name was Gloria. Gloria. Like, what are the chances? She was also blonde hair, blue eyes. It freaked my mom out so much, she threw it away. She got rid of it, she just threw it out. The grandparent that gave it to me has been known to be friends with like mediums and stuff, and her house always had such intense cold spots. It always kind of freaked me out even as a kid. So, 15 years later, my mom's talking to me about this and she's like, yeah, literally a few days after I threw it out, you told me she moved away. I don't know, I feel like some things just can't be coincidences. And that is the story of the time I was haunted. Bye.
Welcome back to Reasons I Should Have Been a Whore. In this episode, Pepsi the Dragon. A woman brings me her 16-year-old daughter. She wants to get these 2 tribal dragons that are connected at the bottom with the Celtic. I asked the kid, how do you want to color these things in? She said, well, the bigger dragon, I want him to have a green body and red hair and purple feet and a pink. I say, honey, this is going to look like a gay pride tattoo. And I mean, gay pride nationwide, but I don't think that's what you're going for. Why don't we dial these colors back a little? She looks me dead in the eye and says, Brandy, the thing is that bigger dragon, that's my spirit animal. And that's really what he looks like. What in the cryptic Khaleesi? Mom pipes in and says, yeah, it's the craziest thing. Since she was a little girl, I would go into her room and she would be talking to this dragon, Pepsi, just as if it was you or I. But now it's great because now if I lose my keys or anything, I just get her to ask Pepsi where they're at. What in the delusional dragons? I make one last suggestion. The kid looks at the computer, looks at me, says, yeah, Pepsi likes it that way. We can do it that way. Oh, good. Pepsi's here. Best case scenario, your teenager is talking to an imaginary dragon. Worst case scenario, there is a demon following your child around and you're asking it where the keys are at.
So it turns out that Purple Mommy is actually a terrifying imaginary friend story. Let's get into it. The original story was on Reddit and it came from the user Professor_Dog, and he talks about how when his son was young and learning to talk, he used to talk about something called Purple Mommy. Purple Mommy was described as being all purple with long hair and bright all white eyes. At the time, the son was having a pretty hard time differentiating between black and purple, so the poster extrapolated that it was very possible that Purple Mommy was actually all black. The son would say that Purple Mommy would lift him out of his crib at night time, and regularly the poster would go into his son's room in the morning and find him out of his crib at a time when he was barely walking. His son was also terrified of the dark, so the poster would always leave the lights on at night time and he would regularly go in and find all of the lights turned off. These conversations about Purple Mommy went on for about a year, and during that time the son explained that Purple Mommy was covered in bandages because she had blood everywhere. As well as lifting him out of his crib at night time, Purple Mommy also was able to take her head off, and Purple Mommy really didn't like Daddy. He also told them that Purple Mommy had no smile, which they believed meant that Purple Mommy had no mouth. Anytime they asked him where Purple Mommy lived, he would always point to the closet in his bedroom. Like I said, this went on for about a year or so, and one particularly rough night where the little boy just wasn't sleeping, the mother went into him and he explained to her, really distressed, that Purple Mommy just wouldn't let him sleep. I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw this comment, I sort of thought it was a sex thing. I've been caught out before, okay? I've been duped before. Anyway, it ended up being the source of an entire podcast episode. So if you want to hear more imaginary friend stories, you can listen to episode 189 of Real Life Ghost Stories podcast.
So I just saw a video talking about children's creepy imaginary friends. and I want to talk about mine. Now, I don't have any of my old drawings, but I will have a recreation at the end of this video. I just assume that my mom threw out all of the pictures that I drew because they were really fucking weird. When I was growing up, I had an imaginary friend called Sissy. I talked about her like she was my sister and sometimes insisted that she was. And my parents kind of just attributed this to me being an only child without siblings, without a lot of friends, so I was pretty lonely and came up with something imaginary to compensate for that. In my imagination time, whenever we would hang out, Sissy was just a kid who was like me. We would play dolls together, and we would watch TV shows together, and she would walk with me to school sometimes, and I even tried to introduce a couple of people to her at recess. They couldn't see her, so they didn't want to play with her. And so if you add that to the tism that I didn't know I had as a child, I was the weird kid. But the thing is, Sissy wasn't always nice. Even though she was my friend, she came from my brain, she was imaginary, she was supposed to be my friend, she wasn't nice all the time. Sometimes when we would take the car home and park it in the garage, I would book it at 1,000,000 miles an hour with my tiny child legs into the house because I was convinced that the moment that garage door shut all the way and it was dark in my garage, that Sissy would crawl out from underneath the vehicle and chase me. Another thing that Sissy would do was whenever we were on car trips or driving in the car somewhere, and I would be staring out the window looking as the scenery passed by, Sissy would be running on all fours along the road beside the car. And sometimes she would jump and swing kind of like an orangutan through the trees along the different power lines and trees and light poles that were along the road. Now, when I was a child, I drew a picture of Sissy running alongside the car and tried to show it to my mom. And I'm convinced this is the reason that she threw all of my old pictures away. So here's a recreation of what that shit looked like. This is the best recreation I can give, but this is fucking horrifying, and now I see why I've been to therapy since I was 6.
My imaginary friend wasn't so imaginary. Growing up, I was super excited when I finally got my imaginary friend. I was about like 6 or 7. And I didn't know at the time that that was a ghost. That wasn't an imaginary friend, that was a ghost. Because in my head, I just never imaginary friended properly because it just seemed to me that everybody else's imaginary friend interacted with them, talked of their own accord, and just, you know, in general would be more than just imagination. Yes, looking back as an adult, I realized, yeah, no, it's in the name, imaginary friend. I just thought that they were friends that no one else could see. And I was so super stoked. I finally got my imaginary friend. But one day she told me to call my dad Earl Muggadoots. Yeah. And it went kind of something like this. Why would I call my dad Earl Muggadoots? Because it'll make him happy. Just do it. What if I don't wanna? Then I'm gonna leave you alone for a while. But you're my best friend. Then do it. And it was a little scary for me. Either way, I went and I called my dad Earl Muggadoots. And he went white as a ghost. He said, "Where did you hear that name?" I said, "Oh, my imaginary friend told me." And he was like, "No one has called me that for years. Why would you call me that?" I said, "Because my imaginary friend told me." And even to this day, like, he just stonewalls every single time I try to bring up, like, why is that such a big deal? And after about a month of me doing weird shit like that because she told me to, my parents, who are very, very Catholic, they decided that she had to go. Now, they didn't like go full-blown exorcism because that's reserved for like truly demonic things, and to this day I don't think she was actually demonic. I think she was just trying to connect with this world in a way that something just made her happy. But they did, you know, walk me through, okay, you need to banish her because this isn't right. She's not supposed to be here. And I did, and I haven't seen her since. I still kind of miss my imaginary friend.
Hey guys, I want to give you a story time of the day I found out my son had an imaginary friend. Now, I've never talked about this, but I really felt the Lord leading me to bring awareness about the situation. So when my son was 3, he's now 5. When he was 3 years old, he started mentioning a name, and I didn't understand who he was talking about. I can't fully remember the name at this point, but let's say there was a name, and the name was Xavier. So he would always talk about Xavier. He's like, Xavier, my friend Xavier, my friend Xavier is gonna come over. And at first I was kind of like, oh, okay, that must be one of the kids, a couple houses down. In our block, there's a lot of kids. Okay, so I was like, oh, it must be those little kids who were here the other day. But as days went on, he just kept talking about this one friend. So I just was alerted, like something in my spirit was alerted. And I began to ask, like, who is this Xavier? Like, is that the kid's name? Like, asking my other kids who are older, I was like, is that the kids down a couple houses down? And I started finding out that that wasn't their names. Now, as time went on, he began to say, oh, my friend's here. And I was like, your friend's here? And he's like, yeah, my friend Xavier, he's here. And I'm like, where? And he just would get quiet. He wouldn't say anything. So I would say, no, there's nobody here, like, you know, and a couple more times went by, and finally I've had enough. I was like, you know what? Absolutely, this is an imaginary friend. Like, this has to be an imaginary friend. But if you know what I know, is that there is no such thing as an imaginary friend. In fact, your kid is actually talking to a demon. A demon has presented itself as a friend, and they have names. Finally, I had enough, and I was like, you know what? No, he is not your friend. That is a demon. I rebuke that demon right now in Jesus' name. It is not welcome in my house. You cannot come here anymore. And I start going off in prayer. I was like, I rebuke you. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. Now, mind you, as I begin to do this, my son began to cry hysterically, okay? He was like, no, Mom, that's my friend. I was like, no. And I had to, like, stand in authority and be firm, okay? And it was not easy, okay? Because, see, they'll use your babies to get you to back off, but not this mama, and I hope you don't either. And guess what? That thing left. My son calmed down, and he never talked about that name, that demon ever again. So if you're a believer now, okay, because some people are not believers, and I get it, and that's okay. But if you are a believer and your children are exhibiting a imaginary friend, or they're talking to some, or bringing a random name, know that it's a demon, and the demon has exposed its name. So yeah, it was a trip, and the Lord told me it was time to tell you all about it. So I pray you come against this in Jesus' name.
Okay, somebody on here was talking about their daughter having an imaginary friend, and it made me laugh because I used to have an imaginary sister. Now, I was way too old to have an imaginary anything. I'm talking preteen, like 11, 12, way too old, okay? Like, I can remember this vividly. Now, Stephanie, my twin sister, was a nuisance. Anything, she would just, I'd clean up something, she'd mess it up. Oh, Stephanie, everything was Stephanie, okay? And then one time we're at a neighbor's house, and the lady was like, would you like a piece of candy? And I'm like, no, I don't like suckers, but thank you. But you know who does? Stephanie loves a sucker, and I'd love to take one to her. Oh yeah, sure, here you go. She gives it to me, and she's like, hey Shayla, I didn't know you had a twin sister. I'm like, oh yeah, she stays at the house. She doesn't really come out much, you know, she's pretty shy. My mom was like, stop it. Like, she had to explain to the lady there is no twin sister. when we got home, like, she was like, Shayla, enough. Like, you gotta stop. People are gonna show up at the house. Like, I'm gonna get turned into the police. You have to stop with the twin sister. And I was like, okay. And I never brought Stephanie up again, but that made me think of it, and that's hilarious.
I'm convinced that all imaginary friends are actually spirit. When I was about 7, we moved into this house, and it was an older house. When we moved into this house is when I suddenly had an imaginary friend. And I'm pretty sure he was a spirit. Obviously, I was that young, I didn't really understand what it was. This imaginary friend was not the friendliest. I remember this little boy would come and play with me in the afternoons after school in my bedroom. Now, the house was on like a hill and it went down. So the house was pretty high, like it started at ground level, and then as it went towards the back, it's like higher on stilts basically. My bedroom was more towards the back of the house. My window was really high. Now wait, it's going to make sense soon. So we used to play. I can remember he would always say weird things, trying to lead me astray, telling me to do naughty things until it got creepy. I remember in the middle of the night he would like harass me and try and make me get up and play with him. So I'd always be running into my mum's room, sleep with him because I was petrified. If he wasn't in the room with me, I would hear him running up and down the hallway during the night all the time. What solidifies it even more for me is my mum and stepdad heard the footsteps up and down the hallway multiple times. They obviously didn't tell me back then, but they have told me that since. And my mum's best friend, once when she was coming to our house, it was nighttime, she was driving down the driveway. She saw a little boy sitting on the windowsill on the outside. She freaked out. She ran inside and she was like, who's that on the windowsill? And there was no one there. Then I started getting all of these ear infections and getting sick quite frequently. And the little boy wasn't around as much. I don't know if that's a direct correlation. That is something that happened for at least 6 months. And then that passed and I started to get better. And then he was back again. Wouldn't really play anymore. It was more about causing mischief, trying to do evil things, get me to do evil things. For instance, it was my birthday coming up and I remember him saying to me that me and my friend should all run out on the road. We did live on a busy main road. I got to the point where I told him I don't want to be friends with him anymore, and this made him mad. The only time I would ever hear from him after this was at night time when I was in bed, and he would just say scary stuff like, you should jump out your window, or you might as well just leave here. Stuff like, your mum doesn't care about you. Just really evil things. And then not long after this, we moved and I never heard from him ever again, so I do believe he was attached to that house. And I believe it was a spirit. But what do you think? Was it a spirit, or did I just have an imaginary friend? And was that my imagination saying really wild, outlandish shit?
So a few weeks ago, I did a glitch video where I ended up talking about imaginary friends, so I'd kind of like to expand on that a little bit. So growing up, I never had an imaginary friend, so I just assumed that everyone that did have them, it was all really actually in their head and they didn't actually see anything. Well, a lot of people actually replied to that video saying that they could actually see a physical being like how you see me right now. Which brings me to this question. Are imaginary friends just a spirit or weird interdimensional being that's assigned to a kid, kind of like the movie Drop Dead Fred? Because like within that movie, all the imaginary friends know of each other and interact with each other like they're friends. And the kids can only see their imaginary friend and not any of the other kids' imaginary friends. One of the comments I got on that video was that this mom said that her daughter's imaginary friend was named Eddie, and every night she would have to set the table for Eddie. And whenever she would start to talk to her daughter and look away from the plate, when she would look at the plate, the food's gone. And she could never catch how the food disappeared. How do you explain the food going missing if it wasn't something that was actually there? And this person commented, my imaginary friend was not imaginary. I didn't know that until my nephew, who was born years after I stopped seeing him, had the same one, but he had trouble pronouncing his name. That was pretty scary. And I'll end this with one that I've read in a previous video just because it's really good, and if you haven't heard it yet, I'm sure it'll get you thinking. My daughter is 4. One day she was playing with a new imaginary friend named Crystal. Weird because that was my imaginary friend's name. I remember her just as clearly as any other childhood friend. She had straight black hair, was white, and had blue eyes, and was around about 8 years old. For funsies, I asked my kid what her Crystal looked like. She described my Crystal to a T. So that really makes me think that these imaginary friends are actually assigned a child, and through generations, some maybe stay within the family. So then that makes me think maybe they are spirits. So now I want to know who else has had a really weird or crazy imaginary friend story. And if you have one, go ahead and comment it on this video and I'll start up a new series about imaginary friends. This is such a crazy subject.
Imaginary friend stories. I'm already scared. When my son was about 3 years old, we were living with my mom in an older apartment. I had already gotten a weird vibe from it. The atmosphere felt heavy and a little oppressive, but I assumed it was just because of the age. However, my son started waking up in the middle of the night and would talk to his friend, who he described as the Hat Man. He would always wake up and tell Hat Man that he didn't want to go play with him because he was supposed to be asleep and that he'd see him tomorrow. This was always followed by him waking me up and asking for a glass of water. Why do I feel like we've heard other stories about the Hat Man, but like not imaginary friend ones? Like people see the Hat Man sometimes. Ugh. One day, my daughter came home from preschool and told me she had a new friend that joined her classroom named Susha. I didn't think much about it. My daughter would say things like she wanted a colorful backpack like Susha's or hair ribbons like hers. One day, my husband asked the teacher to point out which girl on the playground was Susha, and the teacher told him there was no such girl. What the Okay, we have an update. After that, my husband insisted this was an imaginary friend and discouraged my daughter from mentioning her. It was several months before she brought Susha up again. We went on a trip to Argentina from California, and as we were riding up a glass elevator in the Buenos Aires airport, my daughter suddenly pointed down into the crowd and said, "Look, there's Susha. She followed us here." Even though Dad told her to go away. Neither myself or my husband saw a child there where she was pointing. Okay, well, I shouldn't have read that update. Can you imagine like your kid pointing like, oh, there she is, and there's nothing there? My sister and I had the same exact imaginary friend when she was 6 and I was 5. Her name was Narni. Narni? It would freak our older brother and parents out that we both would talk to her and knew exactly where she would be. They would wonder how we both would interact with her at the same time and that our descriptions of her matched. We would even talk about how she would get angry or jealous. Our parents thought for sure that it was the spirit of a child that had passed. When I was little, I claimed to have an imaginary friend who had light brown hair, wore a nightgown, and had stars for eyes. Well, my niece was living at my old childhood home and told me that she has a friend who misses me, and asked why I went away. Why the frick did I just get goosebumps? When I asked her who it was, she described my old imaginary friend. It was super spooky. What the? I swear I have goosebumps right now. What the fuck? Just because I read this scary stuff does not mean I'm not scared, bitch. I'm fucking scared too. Shall I read one more? I'm already like spooked. My youngest sister, who was 4 years old at the time, had an imaginary friend named Paris Jaris. My dad had built her a small playground in the backyard where my mom could see her and hear her while she was in the kitchen. My sister would have tea parties and such with her imaginary friend. One day, my mom heard her say, "Don't worry, as long as I'm alive, they won't hurt you." She paused and said, "Well, if you do that, then I can't help you. It's not nice to kill people." What the Wait, let me reread that. One day, my mom heard her say, "Don't worry, as long as I'm alive, they won't hurt you." She paused and said, "Well, if you do that, then I can't help you. It's not nice to kill." Okay, I got it. It's not nice. Imaginary friend is plotting against the family. Oh my. The imaginary friend's like, either you're down with me or you're going out with the family. Fuck. There's a lot more imaginary friends stories. Let me know if you want more of those, or like, let me know if you had an imaginary friend so I could block you. I'm just kidding. Let me know if you had an imaginary friend. I asked my mom and she said I didn't, so good for me. Last week, I made a video about imaginary friends and I asked if you guys had any, and I did not expect the comments that were left. I had an imaginary friend from the time I was old enough to speak until I was a preteen. Their names were Harvey and the Boogeyman. My son has recently said he's seen Harvey and that he lives under my son's bed. Harvey lived under my bed when I was a child. I 100% believe he isn't an imaginary friend. I don't know what or how, but he's not imaginary. I had a lot, but I've learned later on that they weren't imaginary friends. I'm schizophrenic and they were hallucinations. Out of all my many nieces that I have, one has claimed to have an imaginary friend. She once disappeared in our 2-bedroom apartment. We couldn't find her anywhere and we looked everywhere. There was no way she could have left the apartment. She appeared out of nowhere. It was super creepy. After that day, she never mentioned her friend anymore. I had an imaginary friend. It would always give me balloons, but my parents never believed me. Parents never believe us. What the fuck? My family thought I had imaginary friends where I used to live when I was 4 to 8, but it was 2 kids who died there. I did have a friend that nobody could see. Once, I tried to hug it, then it pushed me away, giving me a big scar on my left arm. My dad saw everything. I had imaginary friends, not friend. All of them were men in their 30s. I remember that they were possessive but also comforting. I never told anyone about them until I was older. Also, there were multiple men. I think about 11 or 12, and every few days they would change. I still have an imaginary friend. I can't see her physically, but I can always hear her in the back of my head.
So it turns out a couple of you are interested in this. All right, so let's take it from the top. Earliest confirmed paranormal thing was when I was 3 or 4. And I was staying at my Nana's house. Anyway, my grandpa was walking through each room, popping his head in to check on us and was like, hey, are you good? And he popped his head in and he's like, Ashton, are you good? And I was like, I'm good, Grandpa. Anyway, I went to go tell my Nana and Mom about it the next morning, and they were like, yeah, he used to do that all the time when he was alive because he like passed away when my mom was 11. And like I had described him in full detail, like when he was walking, because like towards the end of his life he was in a wheelchair, looked totally different. But like growing up, yes, I had the imaginary friends, and like I remember like my parents would ask me to go get like the remote or something, and I'd have a hand it to me. On my 5th birthday, I remember waking up and I was in my parents' bed and I watched this little show on the wall. It was like a little clown show, and they had a train and all that, and I just remember all that because my birthday was also unicorn themed. There was a unicorn on the wall. Very vividly remember that. And there's others here and there, but the one that makes everyone trip out, that like made like a lot of my friends believe, we were in college and me and this girl Sam, we had gotten into a big fight. We were no longer friends anymore, but things were going weird in Sam's room to the point where I even had bad vibes. Like I wouldn't walk near her room because I said it made me sick, and I didn't understand why. I just thought it was because I was angry at her. No, it made me like physically sick to walk by her room. And the thing you need to know about Sam is that Sam had a very rare disease, and like she had almost passed multiple times. And so our running theory was that you can only cross that line one so many times before something comes back with you. Anyways, I have this method, and I actually learned it was a Hindu method, but it's something I started doing as a child when I would see stuff in the house, stuff that I didn't like. It's like where you imagine this like golden light starting from you, and then you move it out your body, and then I would like mentally do a walkthrough of my house and push out all the bad stuff that I didn't like that was in there with me. And I knew the layout of Sam's dorm, so I imagined, like, I knew where she slept in the dorm. So I just imagined Sam laying there, and I did that whole thing, and I walked it out. Anyway, what happened next was, like, I saw, it was like, oh, my room got dark, which I was on campus, and so there's always lights outside, like, that shine through. No, it got dark. And I saw this, like, figure on the wall, and it had this, like, dark, angry purples and, like, reddish tints surrounding it, this, like, shadow figure. Anyway, I then did it for my room, and as soon as I did it, my roommate woke up and was like, I just had the weirdest dream. So anyway, the thing to know about this is I kept the time. I looked at the clock. I knew exactly what time all of this went down. So the next day I went and I got my other friends, Hannah and Rachel, and I was like, hey, so this is what happened last night. These are the time frames. Y'all need to call Sam down because Sam had me blocked. And I had Sam blocked. But I was like, don't tell her anything, just ask her what happened, if anything happened last night. So Sam comes down, and Sam's shocked to see me sitting there, and Sam's thinking that this is something else. We're like, no, let's just talk about this. And I'm sitting there not saying a word, and they were like, Sam, did anything happen last night? She was like, yeah, actually I woke up and it just got like really calm, and I fell into the most peaceful sleep, and I slept the rest of the night because she had been having a fitful sleep ever since this thing had started happening. Anyway, the time frame of when she woke up was the exact time frame of when I did what I did, and then it came up in my room, and then I pushed it out, and that's when she had went to sleep. So my whole friend group was like shocked. And then one of our friends, she was Sam's roommate, she was a DJ, so she had this little stuff that were like, we sat in a little circle and we were like asking it questions, asking it to leave. And anyway, I was like, listen, it's behind me. Like I could just feel the energy. I was like, it's behind me. We have it on tape. Maybe I could message Brittany through Facebook and see if I could get it. But we had it on tape where it was like pissed. And then when we asked it what it wanted, she slowed it down and was able to like magnify it. And it very clearly said, get Sam. And then we did pendulum readings, and it was like, they asked if it wanted me there, and it was like, no. Not no, but hell no. Did not like me. And like that was when I was still a Christian, so I didn't quite understand everything, and I just thought everything in and of itself was demonic, and I didn't understand spirits, and I didn't understand paranormal activities. But what we did do is, because Hannah was like devout Catholic, she had the rosary beads, she had her psalms, she had everything ready to go. We did get rid of it. I did my little energy cleansings and stuff, and me and Sam had scratch marks from that event. Just want to let y'all know. We had scratch marks on us from that event. Anyway, we became best friends after that, and then we had more ups and downs. There's a lot more, but that last one was the one that made, like, everyone in our friend group believe. I would love to hear some of y'all's paranormal stories, because, like, I love talking about this. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a creepy story time for you guys. It starts off very normal. So the family goes to McDonald's, there's a mom, dad, and a daughter, and the daughter goes in the tunnels to play. Since there was no kids there, the mom says, hurry up and go to the top of the tunnel so I can take your picture. So she does what her mom says, goes up there and smiles for a picture. The mom takes a picture, everything seems normal, until the mom takes a look at her phone and takes a look at the picture she took. Before I show you the picture that was on her phone, let me remind you there were no other children there at the time. This is the picture she captured off her phone. The picture of the little girl is covered with a smiley face for her protection. She notices that there's a boy in the picture with her daughter, but she did not see him when she took the picture. When she asked the daughter who was that with her in the picture, she said, that's my imaginary friend. That is so creepy, isn't it? It doesn't even really look like a human almost. What do you guys think?
Did you have imaginary friends growing up? Why do we do this as kids? Why does this happen? Let's talk about it. My name is Christina. I go by Christina the Medium here on TikTok, and I definitely had imaginary friends growing up, and I would be willing to bet that many of you also did as well. Very often these aren't really imaginary friends. Very often these are spirit protectors. These are spirit guides, loved ones on our spirit team that are there to help us and support us in some way. I still have a vivid memory of when I was a little girl. I was probably about 5 or 6, but I had an imaginary friend and his name was Mike. I remember seeing him in my house. He was probably, age-wise, he was probably around in his 30s. Dark hair, light colored eyes, but I would often feel very alone, especially at night in my home. And I remember he would come and sit with me after I would go to bed and literally just sit next to the bed so that I knew that I wasn't by myself. I also used to be scared of the dark, and he really helped me with that, I remember. I can remember him saying, you don't have to be afraid of the dark. It's just being afraid of the unknown, and there's nothing to be afraid of. And with time and with age, eventually I didn't see Mike anymore. He just kind of faded off into the distance with time. But I know now he was an accessory spirit guide for me, somebody that had stepped in to help me kind of get through that hump in my life. Have you ever experienced this before? Let me know in the comments. But I hope this helps. Love y'all.
I have a very sweet story about how my first spirit guide, Zeroth, showed up in my life. So my friend Liv is a psychic medium, and she did a spirit guide reading on me in one of our YouTube videos, so check that out first. She explains the time when my main spirit guide came into my life as a child of 2 or 3 years old. She gets this vision of me playing with blocks, and I kind of figured out what that was. So many children at that age have an imaginary friend, but my imaginary friend was this stuffed lion that I named Johnny. And as a child, Johnny went everywhere with me. And that's why I think Liv was looking through my spirit guide's eyes, through my lion. My spirit guide put himself in that lion to make himself appear less scary, so that he could relate to a 2 or 3 year old.